How are ya? And welcome to the Potsy.ca Safety in Sport podcast. This is presented by Atlas Brace, Slabtown Cider, and Endure Apparel. So thanks to the sponsors for coming on board. Today we have a really exciting guest, an old friend of mine from the mountain biking community. Also comes from my hometown. We've got, let's bring him on here, Tyler Orschel. What's up, Ty?
Hey guys,
Hey,
good to
how's it
be
going,
here.
buddy?
Pretty good. How about you?
Not too bad, man. So, where are you right now? You're at school down in the States?
Yep, yeah, I'm living in Brevard, North Carolina, just on the border of South Carolina, in the mountains.
Oh,
Love
that's
it here.
wicked. So lots of
hmm
riding there, eh?
Yeah, the riding's amazing. The mountain biking and the road riding is like world class.
So are you there on a biking scholarship?
Yep, yeah, this is my fourth year here, but it's really the first year that I've spent the summer here. Normally, I would come home back to Canada
Okay.
for the summer and work, but with COVID and everything back home, it's been easier to keep a part-time job down here.
Do you find with COVID that you've had more time to work on your riding and whatnot?
Um, I would say yes, but it's definitely also brought some challenges with it,
Yeah,
um,
okay.
mostly travel-wise. And then it hasn't really been an equal playing field, like worldwide, because some countries have been shut down for uh, since last year,
Right.
and some opened up last year. So yeah, it's been interesting.
So for the people listening that don't know, so you're racing, you're racing in the over 23 class now, right? The elites?
Yep.
So you're trying to travel to all the races, right? That's that's the goal.
Yeah. The World Cup circuit's definitely my main focus this year. And with the kind of absence of races in Canada and the US, it's been a little bit easier to focus only on racing in Europe. Um, so that's kind of been the goal this year.
So Europe's like the only thing that's like set in stone going, eh? Like the races in North America are kind of like hit or miss.
Yeah, somewhat. There's been a few races down in the US since I guess they started up in March.
Okay.
I did a few over in Arkansas. Those were super cool because they were kind of the first races back after the pandemic.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, the World Cup circuit's the only circuit that the races are pretty much set in stone, and they're not going to be canceled. So it's something you can kind of bet on and train for.
Yeah, that's really good. So they're not doing like the Sea Otter Classic and those kinds of things, or are they?
No, those were canceled like a long time ago. Yeah.
They're earlier in the year, aren't they? Is what time of year is Sea Otter normally?
Sea Otter is usually in April.
Oh,
Um,
okay. So that's
down
right in
in
the thick of it.
yeah.
So talk to me about how you're funding your racing season this year. You got a GoFundMe going?
Yeah. So typically in the past, I've kind of raced primarily in North America, and only gone over to Europe once or twice a year. And I've been able to kind of fund that on my own and with some help from my parents. But this year, moving up into the elite category, it's pretty important that I focus on the World Cup circuit. And this year, somewhat due to COVID, there's only one race in North America on the World Cup calendar.
Whereabouts is that?
That's in Snowshoe, West Virginia, in September.
Okay.
Um, that'll be super cool venue. It's only 6 hours from North Carolina where I go to
Oh, that's
school.
perfect. So it's almost like a backyard race for you at that point, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
After
I
all
can just
getting
like
started.
drive up for the weekend. Be super fun. But yeah, that's the only North American World Cup. So the other six World Cups are in Europe this year.
So
Uh,
what you're trying to do with the GoFundMe is to cover travel, um, hospitality, all those kinds of things, right? Have you made enough to be able to cover those things, or are you still kind of scrounging your way?
so I mean, it depends on the country you're going to because a country like Switzerland is going to be a little more expensive than a country
Right.
like the Czech Republic. But a ballpark range for like one World Cup or one trip is going to run anywhere from like $2,500 to $4,000.
Well,
And the plan for this year is 3 trips to Europe. So it's going to add up to somewhere around twelve to $13,000
just for those trips.
just for those 3 trips to Europe.
Wow.
Mhm.
Well, the one cool thing is you're kind of getting your travel in while you're young, right? Are you doing anything in those countries when you go there, or is it strictly riding and down to business?
Um, it definitely depends on the location. Back in May, I went to Germany and Czech for the first 2 World Cups, but I traveled with Team Canada for those. And being on the trip with Team Canada, there wasn't really like leniency for me to kind of go explore, do my own thing. So at the end of that trip, I got to explore the city in Prague before my flight, which is pretty cool.
Prague's
Um,
cool, eh?
yeah, really cool city. It was just sort of starting to open up with COVID. It was like the first weekend that the restaurants were open, so it's pretty cool.
That's cool. Prague was the I've only been to Europe once, and it was to Prague for a week.
Oh
And
yeah,
I've been itching to get back to Europe ever since. I fell in love with the city. It's incredible. There's so much history and culture in that
yeah,
small city, but like, there's a lot to do.
yeah, tons to do. But yeah, so that trip was with Team Canada, and then I just got back last night actually from Austria, which was a World Cup on its own. And I did that trip on my own, unsupported, I guess you would say. So I did have the leniency to kind of go do some exploring on my own the day after the race. And if you can tell, my face is pretty burnt.
Yeah.
It's snow burned from a hike I did in the mountains on Monday.
Oh wow. So you
So
had
that
the
was cool.
energy after a race to go do a hike to the mountain, eh? I
Yeah,
guess you're one of those elite athletes, so I mean.
yeah. It's funny on like a race week, you're kind of like lowering your hours on the bike. So
Right.
the only hard day on the bike is actually the race.
Right.
So if you compare it to like a normal training week, it's actually easier than a typical training week. So the day after the race, I was a little sore and tired from the race, but fatigue wise, I was pretty fresh.
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
is it kind of like a science, the training, eh? Because you want to be peaking at a certain point. Also, when it comes to season wide training, you want to be peaking at a certain point, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can't be at your best all season. So you try and hit 1 or 2 peaks typically throughout the season. And depending on what your goals are for the season, that could be national champs and world champs. Is like a pretty common 2 peak season for most cyclists. But this year for me, it's a little different with COVID. They had to reschedule our nationals for the end of September, actually,
Oh, really?
when normally it would be like next weekend in a typical season.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're having
Mhm.
to really like spread yourself thin and kind of like prolong that heavy grind, eh?
A little bit, yeah. So basically, I'm just not training towards like a mid-season peak this year,
Right.
and I'm going to focus on being really strong come like mid-August to end of September.
Right.
Yeah.
Will we be seeing you at the 24-hour this year? I doubt it, eh?
Is it happening?
I've heard rumblings of it happening. Adam. I was talking to Adam a couple weeks ago, and I think they're trying to do something. But
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. I'll be home back in Uxbridge from like July 1st till probably August 1st.
yeah.
So if it runs in that time frame, then possibly.
I think it's running like late August or something. But we'll have to get there one of these years. But that's one race that. Have you ever thought about soloing it? That's what I was gonna ask you.
Yeah, I have. I've only done the 24-hour once, and I did it in I want to say a 5-man team.
Yeah. Okay.
It was a lot of fun. I was a junior in cycling, so I was like 17, 18 years old. And yeah, it was a good time. Definitely was like wrecked for like a week though after that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, for sure.
I remember actually the weekend after the 24-hour, I went to Colorado Springs for a race,
Yeah.
and it was at altitude, and I had never raced at altitude before. Um, and the combination of like the fatigue from the 24-hour and then racing at altitude was just like it was bad. I think I pulled out of the race, which is pretty unusual for me.
Really?
Yeah.
But just from the change in altitude.
Yeah, I just had nothing in my legs, like nothing.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
I always get that when I used to race mountain bikes in high school. The first two races of the season, you always get to that point where you're like, why am I even doing this? Like, I don't even like you're in so
Yeah.
much pain. So do you feel that still when you're racing? I guess on the level you're racing, like it must maybe come up or no?
I mean, early season racing is always tough because typically at the World Cup level, most racers are doing pretty heavy like hours in the winter, and they'll be a little less focused on like the high end stuff, like the high intensity. So when you get to that first race, usually it hurts pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I mean, after that, like if you're not hurting, then you're not going hard enough.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
I hear
yeah,
that.
I've almost reached a point where like yeah, like I'm always going to be hurting like
Yeah.
as much as possible.
You have to just accept that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and do you have to try to force yourself to practice like you're racing? Because I know just from my experience when I'm riding, like there's no way when I go out on a Thursday night ride that I want to be hacking up a lung. Like I just don't want to do it. Like how do you push yourself in training to motivate you? Is it just wanting to get better? Is there any specific ways that you do that?
I mean, I think over the years I've seen how the hard training pays off in the races. Um, so I think that's really the main motivator is just knowing that um, the more I dial in training and the more I nail the training I have to do, then the easier it's going to be on race day. And then just the more successful you're going to be in racing, period. Like racing is, it's a funny thing. Everybody thinks it's like you show up and like that's the day you got to perform. But in reality, your performance is based on like the months and months of work you put in before that.
Yeah,
And like what you do on race day is like, it's mostly in your mind. It's mostly mental.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's what people don't understand with professional athletes. You could really say that in most sports, but especially in
Sure.
racing sports, cycling, Tour de France, for example. Everyone thinks, oh, those guys like they're going so hard on that day. You didn't see how many days those guys have put in, how many years, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just you've been training for this since what high school, like grade 9. You've been training for where you're at now, and everything
Mm-hmm.
you eat and put into your body, everything is reflective on what happens on race day.
For sure. Yeah. And I think a lot of athletes definitely struggle with the mentality of like, I have to be perfect. I have to do everything perfect because that's what the best are doing. And, there's definitely some validity in that. The top guys in the world are, they're not messing around. Every day is like a day for them to get better. But I think it's also really important, especially at a young age, to not put too much pressure on yourself. And
Yeah,
if you can't make training one day, or you want to go have fun with your friends, it's important to have those breaks
yeah,
and like keep that mindset like somewhat relaxed, because it'll take a toll on your mind
yeah.
if you're always go go go.
They call it burnout, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so you got to avoid that, and then not to mention you're in school too, right? So you have
yeah,
to maintain a level of academic prowess. So you're
totally.
racing against the top guys like Nino Schurter, and you're in that class now. So what's it like
Yeah.
now lining up with those guys? Like explain that to me.
um it hasn't really sunk in that I'm racing those guys, because I'm starting like, 70 places behind guys like Nino and the top
Yeah,
guys in the world. But yeah, I mean, the World Cup field is so deep that even though I'm starting in the 80s, like this past weekend on lap one, I made it up into the top 50. And then all of a sudden I'm riding with guys that have ridden at the front of World Cups before.
that's crazy.
And it's like, wow, like, can I really hang in here with these guys? Like, I don't know. But yeah, I'm just kind of taking this year as um, like a learning year.
Yep.
Because I know that I'm not I'm not going to be competing with the best in the world right now. But if I can learn something every race against these guys, then I'll just hopefully slowly progress.
And cycling is a little bit different from like your standard stick and ball sports. Like hockey players, football players, their best years are their younger years. With
Hmm.
cycling, they tend to get better as they age. Is that not true?
Yeah, I mean, that's how it's been typically, but I would say it's kind of a mixed bag now.
Okay.
In World Cup mountain biking, I don't know if you're familiar with some of the new guys on the scene, but like Thomas Pidcock, he's a year younger than me,
Oh,
and
really?
he's transferred kind of from the road and cyclocross background.
Oh,
He's
okay.
he's like a 3 or 4 time world champion in cyclocross, and he's kind of picked up mountain biking the last 2 years, and he's dominating the elite fields this year. Uh,
Really?
yeah, and he's only 22 years old.
So you're
Uh,
allowed to go in the elites even if you're younger than 23, eh?
yeah, it's definitely like an exception.
Okay.
They don't always do that. You definitely have to have
The
um,
skills
a pretty elite status for it.
for sure.
But I think they rolled out new rules where if you're in the top 10 in the overall as a U23, then you have the option to move up. Um, but for a guy like him, I mean, he's touted as one of the most talented cyclists in the world right now on like the road. Like he's signed with a team that'll be riding in the Tour de France in a couple weeks.
Holy crap.
Yeah, so
So he's doing a little bit of everything.
he's doing a little bit of everything, and it's not common. There's only a few guys that have kind of showed the ability to do that. But it's pretty impressive.
It is impressive. That's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
I find with mountain biking, I've always loved mountain biking, but when it come to racing, I was always lacking on the stamina side of things. Like, um,
Yeah.
I'd be the first guy into the first turn because I wanted to, I wanted
Yeah.
to go as hard as I could, and I'd do all right in the downhills, and then first hill, I'm out. It was
Yeah.
over for me. So,
Yeah,
um, take me through like a standard week in your training schedule. Like, what does that look like?
for sure. Yeah. So typical week when I'm not racing is going to be like um, 10 to 14 hours would be like a rest week for me. And then 14 to anywhere to like 25 hours on the bike is like a pretty
And that's
common.
road and mountain or whatever you can mix in.
Yeah, that's a mix for sure. In the winter, I spend quite a bit of time on the road bike, building that stamina and the endurance because you're always pedaling on the road bike.
Yeah.
It's really good training. I really enjoy and value the road bike training. And it's definitely easier here living in the mountains to do that, as opposed to back home in Uxbridge where you're getting buzzed by cars all the time.
Yeah, yeah, that's what something I've thought a lot about and talked to people about is the dangers of cycling on the roads. It's seeming to get pretty bad these days. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of road rage in the vehicles and vice versa. So what do you do to keep safe on the road when you're out riding on your road bike?
I mean, it depends where I am. Like if I'm back home, I'm gonna ride a little bit differently. If I'm on a busy road, it's actually better to ride a little more like aggressively and ride instead of riding like right on the white line, ride maybe like 2 feet in from the white line. Just so that if a car is approaching you, they definitely have to like move over to give you the space to go by. They can't just kind of buzz right by you.
Okay.
Because that's how a lot of cyclists get hit is cars don't really realize that they're like going to be in the way, and then they go to pass, and there wasn't enough room, and then they
Yeah.
clip them. Um, but definitely wearing bright clothing helps a lot, and always riding with a light on the back.
Yep, that's smart.
Um, but mostly just like always kind of checking in on your surroundings. Like I probably look back unconsciously, like once every minute, honestly, once every 2 minutes, maybe, just to kind of see what's going on behind me.
For sure. Those are all good tips. It's
Mhm.
tricky. It's tricky because you can see both sides, right? Like I'm guilty of both being in a car, being like, why are you taking up the whole road? But
Yeah.
then you put yourself in the other on the other side, and I've been on the other side. I got a gravel bike a couple years ago, and I tried
Mhm.
to, I live in Pickering now, and so I hit the road down. I take the road to the trails down by the lake there. So when I'm on the
Yeah,
lake,
yeah.
it's such a great spot to ride. It's paved trails, and
Hmm.
but riding down Kingston Road when there's
Oh yeah.
100 cars passing you, bike lanes are great, but they're not enough of them out there.
No,
So
not in Ontario, that's for sure.
yeah, it's definitely and then headphones. Do you wear headphones or do you try to avoid that?
That's gonna depend on where I'm at, where I am.
Right.
If I'm here in the mountains and I'm kind of out on my own and I'm doing like an interval workout, I'll have headphones in. But if I'm on a busy road, I definitely won't have my left headphone in
Smart.
that's exposed to the cars. But this year I got a pair of headphones. They're called the Aftershocks,
Yeah.
and
There you go.
I've been trying them out. They're okay, but basically they're like a bone conduction
Yeah, I used a
headphone.
pair of them. They're really cool. They
Yeah,
vibrate on the bone of your ear, right?
yeah. So they don't block out the noise, so you can still hear all the cars behind you. So I'll use those sometimes if I know I'm going to ride in a busy area.
You
But
find them weird?
yeah, they're weird for sure.
You got to get used to them. It takes a while, but I've been riding with them for like 2 years now, and I
Oh yeah,
well, like you said, just with hearing the traffic, like kind of feels like you have eyes on the back of your head when you can hear a car coming, right? But
for sure.
yeah, those are great. But yeah, definitely, I wouldn't recommend. And you know this, I'm telling anyone who's listening, don't wear headphones if you're on a busy street.
No,
It's just not a good idea.
yeah, because you don't know if someone's like honking at you, and the worst thing is when you get a driver angry. That's the most dangerous situation, I think, is when someone's pissed off at you.
Whether it's your fault or not, you just have to be
Yeah,
aware to get out, stay the hell out of the way of that guy, right?
yeah, yeah. It's sometimes like I've had, like confrontations with drivers where I've wanted to like roll up to their window and just smash it in, but like you never want to have a confrontation with a person in the car because, I mean, you're on a bike and they're in a car,
Yeah,
so
they'll win that one 9 times out of 10.
for sure, for sure.
You haven't had any close calls?
Um, I've been really lucky, I would say. I've never been hit by a car. Um, I've been buzzed really closely
Yeah,
before.
and you're
Um,
spending a lot of hours on the bike, so you'd have the opportunity to.
yeah, lots of time. Just like making cars aware, like making yourself present on the road really helps, like signaling when you're going to turn, and like always like looking back before you make a move, helps a lot. But I would say I've just been kind of lucky that I
Yeah,
haven't
for
had an
sure.
encounter.
It sounds like you're very aware, which is like one of the best parts. The worst thing you could do is just have your head down and be tunnel vision on the bike,
Yeah.
pretending it's not there. Like you have to be.
Mhm.
They call it when you're on a motorcycle, you're supposed to be defensive, right? So
Yeah.
call it defensive driving or whatever it is. It's way better to, assume the worst. If there's a guy coming up in front of you, assume he's gonna cut you off and prepare for the worst. Just because who knows what anyone's gonna do sometimes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like whenever there's like a transport truck or a larger vehicle behind me, I sometimes if it's like a really busy road, I'll just actually pull off,
Yeah,
to avoid like just possibly causing an accident or because they have a hard time passing cyclists on the road because they're so big.
I feel like it's something like it should be taught in driver school.
Yeah.
Like people because with this pandemic also cycling's becoming such a huge sport. It's grown
Oh yeah.
exponentially. I don't even know the numbers, but I know when you go
Oh,
to a
it's
local bike shop, you can't even get a bike.
yeah. No, I work at a bike shop down here, and it's crazy. Like it's unbelievable how much it's grown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people are gonna quit in 2 years because it's too hard. We'll
Yeah.
see.
I don't know if that's why they'll quit. Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah, but yeah, I feel like with driver's ed, they should add a part with with sharing the road with cyclists because thinking back to, I mean, I've had my license for over 10 years now, but
Yeah,
thinking back that like nothing was ever said to me about what to do as a driver
never.
when it comes down to a cyclist, right? And I
Not at
know
all.
I know you need to yield the right of way to the oncoming, but
Mhm.
people need to learn how to share the road, because cyclists have every right to be on the road just as much as drivers. And you know what? It's also saving the planet having more cyclists and less people driving cars. So
For sure. Yeah, and it's less, I think it's less of an issue in a place like Oxford where we live because there's just not the volume of cyclists, even though it is like a popular place to ride. But in like the city, like people are commuting to work all the time and cars don't know how
yeah.
to pass in there. Um, so yeah, I totally agree. It definitely should be a part of driver's ed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, biking in the city, I've heard, is just like the best way to get around.
Yeah.
Um, I've got a friend who's a bike cop in Toronto,
Oh
and
yeah.
he said I'll beat anybody around the city on a bike. Like
Hmm.
have a guy on a motorcycle, have a guy on a car, he'll win on a bike because you
Yeah.
can just get through the traffic so much better, and you're so nimble and able to take the
Yep.
alleyways. And yeah, cycle. I always said if I ever lived in like a city, I would sell my vehicle and just ride a bike everywhere.
Yeah. Well, you know what is changing the game on that front is e-bikes.
Yeah,
So I just got back from Austria, and the number of electronically assisted bikes like everywhere there was like I could not believe it.
really.
Like people like riding trails on e-bikes, like riding roads on e-bikes, like riding around the city on e-bikes. It's unbelievable.
That's
That's like all
awesome.
they have now.
You know, that just changes the game, right? Because of the distance you can drive. Like
Yeah.
if you had a 20-kilometer ride to work, like you're not doing that on a pedal bike in the morning. But if
No.
you're on an e-bike, you might do it.
Yeah, you get there in probably 30 minutes or
That's
less.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are big, and it's been
Mhm.
kind of like kind of controversial, I know, in the mountain biking
For
scene.
sure.
What have you seen? Have you seen anybody sticking their nose up to the e-bikers on the trails?
Well, where I live down here, it's a big controversy because we're surrounded by like national forest.
Right.
And right now in the national forest, e-bikes are banned. Um, and there's not like a definitive reason why. There's kind of multiple avenues to it. People think that it's because they don't want the trails to get torn up, but I mean, the truth is, e-bikes, they're not tearing up the trails anymore than a regular bike.
No.
And down here, the bigger issue is liability because now you've got people that might not have the skills to get to a place in the forest or get to a really hard trail. But now they got an e-bike so they can get up there, get in the mountains, and now they can go out and possibly hurt themselves. Um, and that's the bigger issue in a place where I am now.
So it's
Um,
pretty technical trails out there, eh?
oh yeah, yeah, it's like full mountain enduro. Like it's almost like what you'd see out west in British.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow, that sounds like heaven for me.
yeah, it's like a hidden gem, I'd say, because not a lot of people know about it.
And how far are you from the trails where you're currently like living?
So I live in town. It's a pretty small town. I'd say it's comparable to Uxbridge.
Okay.
And from my house, I hop on the bike path and I'm in the national forest in like 12 minutes.
No way.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so that's another thing I was going to ask was about mountain biking in general, but with the World Cup as well. Are you finding the features getting more aggressive? Is it becoming more technical?
I would say, I don't know if I'd argue it's getting more technical, but it's definitely getting more aggressive. Like you're not getting more roots and rocks, but you're getting steeper, bigger features, I would say. And it might have something to do with kind of tailoring to like new advancements in bikes, like running dropper posts and bigger tires
Right.
and stuff like that. But I would say it's overall getting harder.
And would you say it more inherently dangerous with that?
Yeah, I would say so.
And so are you finding that there's more crashes and injuries happening on the cross country tour?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, really, eh?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah, it's like a fine line between like being in control and being out of control.
so it's almost become like an enduro race, like so to speak, right? Like not that with enduro, correct me if I'm wrong, you're only timed on your descents, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So now it's like you're racing enduro, but you're being timed on your ascents and descents and everything in between.
A little bit, yeah. It's I'd say it like depends on the course. So some
Yeah.
courses, like the one I just did in Austria, was very much like what you're describing. It was like, um, like very like the descents and the climbs were very separate, and that was pretty much the only two features on the course. It was like climb, descent, climb, descent, climb, descent, finish. And there was not really much in between. So it was like how much you could give on the climb without going too deep, that you're able to ride the descent clean.
Yeah. And your descent's only going to be a half the time as your climb, so you're not going to have much
Yeah.
time to recover.
Yeah. Like I think this past weekend we were climbing for like 9 minutes of the 11-minute lap or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was hard.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. So is it getting like, did you have to kind of like dig into your nerves to do some of these features? Like, are they getting that technical that you're almost like not wanting to hit some of them, or some guy like, is there a bailout if you don't want to hit certain features? Like, I haven't seen a race in a little while, so take me through like what kind of
Yeah.
stuff you're looking at.
Yeah, I would say if there's like a feature that's so big that if you don't ride it properly, you're going to get injured. There's usually a beeline that goes around it, and it'll usually be anywhere from like 2 seconds to 5 second, even 10-second time penalty for taking the
Really?
beeline. Um, I would say technical riding is one of my stronger suits. And I haven't really found a World Cup course that I haven't been able to ride everything. But when you add in like race pace and going into the feature at 200 beats per minute
Yeah.
with your heart rate, that kind of changes the game, because now you're like, you barely have caught your breath, and you're entering like
Yeah.
a super rocky steep descent.
Your
Um,
legs are shaking, you're fatigued. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like a game time decision. Like, like am I with it enough to ride this section or not? Um, yeah.
That's crazy, man.
Mhm.
Like, so I'm thinking about every time I ride, we ride in Durham Forest back in Uxbridge a lot and Dagny.
Mhm.
You get going pretty good through these trails, and I always think like, what the heck? What happens if I hit a tree? Like, I'm always thinking about I'm always thinking about it because I come from motocross background. That was my
Yeah.
sport. Like
Yeah.
all the protective equipment I had on with motocross, I felt like if I crashed, I should be good. Like I talked about it in one of my old previous podcasts with Kyle Coxworth about
Mhm.
knowing how to crash.
For
So
sure.
there's a mix of knowing how to crash and then dressing for the ride. Like dressing for the crash is that's kind of what I like to say is dress for the
Mhm.
crash. With mountain biking, you have a half helmet. You're essentially all wearing road bike helmets.
Yeah.
Do you think we would see a change to maybe some type of aerodynamic full face in the future, or with it being is becoming so dangerous?
That's a good question. I don't think you would see much changes in the helmet. I think it's possible you could see maybe some safety equipment in other aspects be increased. But on the cross country circuit, I don't think they would change the style of helmet we're riding,
Yeah.
just because it's like so like so old, and like the way it's been forever.
Yeah, it's the same way they wouldn't do instant replay in baseball forever,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
it's kind of the nostalgia of it, I guess.
for
But
sure.
yeah, I guess you never know, right? Like I just hate for someone to people to start getting hurt more on these features for it to 'cause I just yeah, it's just something that always crosses my mind. I always thought about how could they one of the sponsors of the show is a neck brace, motocross neck brace company called Atlas Brace.
Hmm.
And I think what they do for full face helmets is incredible, and they do a really good job. And I always think with mountain biking, because I've heard of some people having some catastrophic neck injury from hitting trees in mountain biking. I mean,
Oh yeah,
you
for
hit a
sure.
tree, there's not a whole lot you can do it sometimes, but I sometimes I'm out there riding and I'm like, what could we do to make this safer? That's kind of the reason I started this podcast is I'm always trying
Mhm.
to come up with ways to make a sport safer, because I love action sports. I love intense sports with wheels, but
Yeah,
I hate getting hurt because I've been hurt too many times,
I'm
right?
with you. I'm with
Yeah.
you.
Have you had
Um,
any oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, yeah, you go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, have you had any bad injuries with cycling or mountain biking?
Um, I'd say like borderline bad, not like where I was rushed to the hospital or anything.
Yeah.
I've had one or two kind of minor concussions on the bike. Um, those weren't a big deal. I recovered pretty fast, but my main injury is I have a loose shoulder that I've
Oh,
dislocated a few times while riding, and it's definitely my primary concern now when I'm crashing. It's like just don't extend your arm and let your shoulder pop out of the socket because
oh man.
um, yeah, I had one experience down here in the mountains. We were out there pretty far, like probably like 30K from town, and I went over the bars. It was like a really light crash, like I was fine, but I popped my shoulder out, and I hadn't done it in like 2 years. So it had tightened up pretty good.
Yep.
And what that meant was I couldn't get it back in the socket while I was out on the trail.
Oh my gosh.
So luckily we had phone service and we were able to call one of my buddies to meet us at the bottom of the trail. But I still had to hike out the trail with my bike in my other hand while my arm was out of the socket. That was by far the worst experience I've had with any injury.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and that's the thing with shoulders is like once you do it once, it's kind of like a nagging injury because you loosen up all
unfortunately.
those tendons and ligaments and
Yeah, the first time I did it in hockey.
oh really? Yeah,
Mhm.
good old hockey, right?
Yeah, it's my
Were
last.
you were you trying to body check someone and you hit the boards or something like that?
No, it was a stupid, stupid fluke accident. It was like the last 20 seconds of the game, and I shouldn't even have been out there. And I was racing a guy into the corner for a puck.
Oh,
We were still like probably 20, 30 feet from getting to the boards where the puck was. And he just reached over and grabbed my arm before we got there. He grabbed it and like yanked it behind me, and my arm just did like a full 360 and it just like ripped my shoulder right out of my socket.
my God. How old were you when that happened?
I think I was 19
Okay.
at the time.
So it wasn't like you were young and
No,
developing or anything like that. That's brutal.
yeah, that was rough.
Yeah,
Um,
hockey can be gnarly.
yeah,
And
yeah. I think
I
I was lucky playing it for 15 years, and I only came out with a concussion once, and then my shoulder injury.
yeah, concussions. I wanna talk. My cousin did a study on concussions and youth.
Hmm.
You know Matt. So I wanted to have him on one day to talk about concussions because that's another really important thing, especially with youth in sports, and especially with contact sports. But cycling has its fair share of slams and hits to the head. True,
For
and
sure.
I think we talked about helmets when we talked on the phone a little bit about them having new technology with MIPS.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think about the helmets that are out these days? Do you think they're doing a pretty good job? And is there anything you think that they could do better?
Yeah. So I think there's a long way to go for helmets. I think pretty soon we're going to see them move away from that foam architecture that we've seen for like ever.
Yeah,
It's good, but one hit and it's cracked, and then it's no good anymore.
yeah,
So I think in the near future we're going to see new materials coming out in helmet designs. But kind of the new thing on the circuit is I think Specialized was the first company to come out with this, but I don't know the name of the helmet, but it's got sensors built into it. And
oh really?
if you take a crash that's hard enough for the sensors to register, it actually sends a text to a phone that you had like paired with the helmet,
Yeah.
and basically it'll say like so and so has crashed like hard enough for like a reading, and like this is where they are.
Whoa,
Yeah,
that's really cool. So because that's another thing with you probably ride a lot alone, right?
a ton most of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I always think of that too. I went out to the trails Dagmar when they opened, and
Hmm.
I went by myself and I was so excited, and I got riding, and I clipped a tree and went face first into one of the rock features.
Oh no.
And I like luckily nothing, I don't know, it was a fluke, but
Yeah,
I was fine. And I kept riding and I'm like, what if I knock myself out?
I know.
Like then what?
Yeah.
It's sketchy.
Yeah. There another thing is the new Garmin's, they have a crash feature as well. So also if you I think it has more to do with speed rather than impact, but basically if your Garmin goes from like, 15 kilometers an hour to zero in like 1 second, it will sense that you've crashed and it'll send a text to whatever emergency contact you've set up in your Garmin. And it'll basically say like same thing as the helmet, like this person has crashed.
Right.
So like I have it set up um, like that where it sends a text to my girlfriend if I've
Cool.
crashed.
See,
Um,
that sounds good, but for me, they'd be getting texts like 5 times a ride.
but you can also right away you can basically click like I'm okay.
Okay, yeah, right
It'll
on.
like it'll cancel the message or whatever.
Yeah. That's
So
really cool though. I've seen another thing a few years ago, where it was like a neck donut that turned into like an airbag that went around. It was more for like road cyclists, but if
mhm.
they got hit and it like noticed a certain amount of like G forces or some kind of force, the airbag would deploy over the head and make it kind of like a
No way.
astronaut helmet. Yeah, which I
Interesting.
found really cool, but to be used in like a racing scenario, like you guys would probably have that thing just blow up on you just from an intense descent, right? So
For sure. Yeah, I think we'll see more with the digital and the sensors. I think we'll see more kind of on that front with helmets. It'll probably become more mainstream. Right now, it's only built into like the highest end helmet made by a few brands.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think that'll become more common, and then definitely some new helmet like composition.
materials, yeah, because you know what, you look back to like the helmets our dads were wearing back in the day, and they're not that much different, right?
No,
I think Smith does a couple cool things with theirs. They were like one of the first to put MIPS in, and then they have that
yeah,
Coroid technology, which is like basically it's like cylindrical channels,
the honeycomb. Yeah,
honeycomb. Yeah, so
yeah, yeah.
more helmets will come out that way. I wonder if they would ever just include like airbags. Not to say a whole airbag, but within some hard casing, have some air, or even that
Yeah,
D30. There's lots of different things out there. I always look to motocross helmets. Um,
right,
they always have like the highest technology in them with rotational forces, and
for
they
sure.
have for different levels of impacts too, right? Because like a hard crash versus a soft crash is very different on the head.
Definitely.
So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say I take a lot of like soft crashes.
yeah,
Um, and it's those crashes are like it's just part of the sport. Like you're gonna
yeah,
get that in every sport.
yep,
But it's really the hard crashes that we got to be worried about.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, it's funny
Mm.
too, like with motocross helmets, they used to only design like so going back 5 to 10 years ago, they would only make the helmet do well in a hard crash. And they're
Mhm.
finding that they're building the helmets out of such stiff materials that when a guy would have just like a small tip over that like normally you'd think you'd get up and dust yourself,
Yeah.
they would get a concussion from a small tip over because the helmets were so hard. And it was like
Wow.
basically like not even having a helmet on at that. So
Wow.
they've switched it to like three different densities for like soft crashes. So I wonder if that's something somebody's working on in the mountain bike industry. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think some things will be coming because, yeah, like I said, it's kind of been the same for a while now, and I think it's time that things start to kind of evolve.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Hmm.
So where's the next race?
I've got a local race actually this weekend
Right
here
on.
in Brevard, North Carolina. That'll be kind of like a fun local race, not super serious. And then in 3 weeks, the first Canada Cup of the year is actually happening out in Quebec.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, so that's the next kind of focus for me is the first Canada Cup, and then second Canada Cup is the week after, and then after that I have a big break until kind of the end of August, and that's when World Championships are.
Yeah, so you
So
got
if
to
I
be ready for
qualify,
that. So where do you see yourself calling home after? Are you done school after this year?
yeah, I'm actually done in December. So I'm doing a double major program, and
Okay.
I didn't take really any reduced loads to like manage my traveling with racing. I kind of
Yeah.
decided I didn't want to be here any longer than I needed to be. But with the double major, I just had so many courses that I'm doing 4.5 years.
Okay.
Um, so this coming fall is my last semester.
Cool.
Um,
So do you see yourself diving into full-time racing before you try to uh, join the workforce, or are you going to try to manage both?
um, Yeah, I mean that's always the question, right? Is like once you're done school, are you gonna get a job and try and race as well?
Yeah.
I think anything more than a part-time gig on the side is pretty much going to end anyone's professional race career, in my opinion. You know, you can compete, at the top level of the sport in Canada and work on the side for sure, but you're not going to compete worldwide in Europe with the best because, I mean, they're devoting their entire lives to
Yeah,
the sport. They're doing everything right. They're training. Their days are just 100% focused on their training. So I think in the next year, I might try and figure out something I can kind of do on the side to kind of just, uh, you know, um, keep me going, pay
yeah,
the bills. But I definitely want to give it a shot.
right
Um,
on, man.
yeah.
You might as well, right? Like while you're young,
Hmm.
and don't have, you don't have a mortgage and don't have all those responsibilities. I think it's worth it to chase your dream, man. That's really
For
cool.
sure. Yeah. I mean, you only got one shot with this endurance sport like this. Like, it's
Yeah,
not something you can just kind of put aside and then come back later.
yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
Are you going to be moving back to Uxbridge? Or are you going to stay down there, or what are you thinking?
That's a good question. I think it'll be kind of a mix.
Yeah,
But to compete at the World Cup level, you pretty much need to live in a warm climate in the
yeah,
wintertime, because you got to be able to put in like 15, 20, 25-hour weeks on the bike. And although you can mix in some cross training for sure with an
yeah,
endurance sport, you can do skiing and snowshoeing and stuff like that. It's just not going to be the same as
yeah,
being somewhere you can ride all the time.
yeah,
Um, so I kind of see myself like spending most of the winter here, maybe being gone racing in the spring, and then spending some summer back home in Uxbridge.
for sure.
Yeah,
For sure. Yeah, it's all about seat time, right?
yeah, yeah.
So your GoFundMe, is it still live? People can donate to you?
Yeah, it's still live. Basically, I created the GoFundMe to help fund my racing in Europe, because that's kind of like the extra bit of cost, or it's the main cost really, but it's the cost that I can't make up for on my own.
Yeah,
I've been able to fund racing in North America for the last 5 or 6 years, but just getting to Europe,
yeah,
the
it's different.
expenses are just so much higher. So I ended up talking with my team manager, and he thought it was a good idea to give GoFundMe a try, and it ended up being really successful. And I raised a ton of money.
That's awesome, man.
Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
saw you got on the news and everything too. Hey, that's pretty.
yeah,
That's how I kind of caught wind of what you're doing and how well you've been doing with everything. That's really really sweet.
yeah.
Um,
That was cool. It was totally out of the blue and not really expected.
it's cool, man. All
Mhm.
right, man. Well, do you have any sponsors helping you out that you want to thank or give a shout out to?
Yeah, I mean, Durham Shredders is I'm sure you've heard of Durham Shredders. It's the local the local youth cycling program. This started up a couple years ago, and I've been kind of involved with since the beginning. They're my main team sponsor, and then Norco Bikes is the bike sponsor for the team. But honestly, like at this point in my career, I don't have any like big sponsors that are funding my racing career. So really, it's mom and dad.
Yeah.
They're the main sponsors, and then it's the cycling community that's helped me out with the GoFundMe. That's what's getting me to the races.
That's awesome, man. Well,
Yeah,
I'm glad you've been doing well with it, and I'm glad you're chasing your dreams. Awesome talking with you today, Tyler, and hopefully we'll catch you on the trails very soon.
for sure. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Tanner.
Yeah. Okay, so if you guys want to support Tyler and all his racing, you could head over to potsy.ca and go to the ambassador section. I've got a link to his GoFundMe account, and Tyler's agreed to be an ambassador for the Potsy brand. So basically, he's kind of a spokesperson for what we're trying to do here. He talked about Durham Shredders, which is another really cool organization that is out of Uxbridge, where it's like a learn to ride for young kids, and they're doing a really good job spreading the sport. So yeah, that was a great conversation with Tyler. Wanted to give a shout out to our sponsors, Endure Apparel. Endure has given a code 15% off if you use the code POTSY. That's POTSY. So head over to their site if you want to get a pair of socks. I just ordered 3 pairs this week, and they're so comfy. They're the nicest socks I've ever worn. So check them out. Atlas neck brace. Remember their new Atlas Vision brace um, fills the void between the neck brace and non-neck brace wearers. So check out Atlas brace and Slabtown cider. Um, Finally able to go to a patio. So make sure this week and this weekend to go check out Slabtown cider. Try their new stuff. Once again, their newest stuff is the vanilla bourbon. So check out Slabtown cider. And that'll be all for tonight, everybody. So I'm Potsy, and remember, just for the crash, not the ride.